A vital truth is stressed at the beginning of this passage. It's one we'll see running throughout the story of the family line of Isaac. Now remember, this is the line of ongoing promise. You know, these are the generations, or this is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. The line of ongoing promise, the heirs of God's great promises to bless all mankind. And we've immediately hit another roadblock, haven't we? We kind of hit one with Abraham. We hit another one now because Rebekah, Isaac's wife, is barren. But Isaac has learnt one or two things from his father's mistakes, and he prays to God. He waits on God, and after 20 years, that's 20 years, by the way, in which time neither Isaac nor Rebekah tries to take matters into their own hands the way that Abraham and Sarah did with Hagar. You know, there's not a long time spent here, but you think they deserve credit for that. And after that 20 years, Rebekah conceives. The vital truth that this teaches us is that God's plan of promise, the plan of blessing, unfolds according to his sovereign will, not the manipulation of people. That's going to be important as we go through Isaac's family line, which really is a story of Jacob. Now, God unfolds his plan often in partnership with people, because God doesn't seem to act until Isaac prays, does he? He answers Isaac's prayer, but it happens according to God's plan, according to his power and his timing. It is not something that people can force. It is not in our control. And as Rebekah has this very painful pregnancy, her unborn children violently struggling within her, she does the right thing and goes to God for help. Again, more credit to Rebekah. She does the right thing here. And the prophecy that she hears from the Lord will echo through hundreds of years of Israel's history, and it gives us a lens to view all of the events that follow. So that everything that happens in the rest of today's reading and the chapters ahead, we should interpret through what the Lord said to Rebekah here, because God is going to do things in a way that runs directly against the flow of their culture. The older will serve the younger. So this morning, let's meet these two very non-identical twins, Jacob and Esau. First of all, we'll start with Esau. Now, he's the firstborn, the one who's born first. And he looks every bit the ancient ideal of a hero. He's ruddy, he's hairy, he's tough. He's a man's man, isn't he? He's the kind of leader that the ancient world yearned for. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I was in the British Museum, and you've got all these statues of kings. They're like big, tough, powerful men, slaying lions, hunting, fighting, just like Esau. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful, a mighty hunter. He's like a 90s action movie hero. I can see him in a statue with his white vest there. And he reminds us of Nimrod, who we read about back in chapter 10, the founder of Babylon. He reminds us of Ishmael, just a few chapters ago, the wild donkey of a man. And Esau is Isaac's favourite. We read that, didn't we, in verse 20? Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau. That's a bit of a worrying sign, isn't it? That Isaac's showing preference like this, and it's kind of to the one that God has said he's not going to favour. Old Testament storytelling, though, it doesn't work the same way as ours. So when you see a visual description of someone, because maybe you think it's a bit unfair to kind of pick on Esau for being hairy, when you see a visual description of someone, it's usually meant as a shorthand description of their character. Now, Esau, like I said, he's described as hairy. That's kind of where his name comes from, because Esau sounds a bit like hairy. And it's not just saying he's a bit hirsute, because there wouldn't be anything wrong with that. It's a suggestion that he's bestial. Now, some of the Hebrew in this passage Makes him sound like a lion or a wild dog roaming around, seizing prey in his mouth. And we see that animal character played out when one day he returns from the hunt, exhausted, while his brother's making some red stew. And he's polite. It doesn't maybe come across in English. He is polite, but he's really blunt. And it's like he's saying, give me that red. I'm starving. I'm fit to drop. He's a creature of animal passions. And Jacob offers him some. Maybe holds it out in front of him, lets him get the smell coming off it, on the condition that he sell him his birthright. Now, in the ancient world, you divided up the inheritance into parts equal to the number of sons plus one. So if you had 2 sons, you divide it into 3 chunks, and the older brother gets the extra portion. That's the significance of the double portion in the Bible. So when Elisha asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit, he's not saying, I want to be twice as powerful as you. He's saying he wants to be treated as Elijah's firstborn son. He wants to inherit, the double portion of Elijah's ministry. So what Esau's selling for a portion of this lentil stew is his rights as firstborn. That might be obvious to you. I just want to stress it so we're all on the same page. That means the honour and privilege of the firstborn, the kind of preeminence within the family. We're going to think about that tonight, if you can make it out. During the father's lifetime, he's going to be kind of the most important son. And then the double portion of the inheritance on their father's death. Now, I think Jacob and Esau both surely know the promises that have been passed down to their family. They have to be aware, don't they, that the blessing of God means more than just the money Isaac has. And Isaac's doing quite well for himself, remember. God has blessed Isaac. And yet, even though the firstborn's right will contain, it seems, the amazing promises handed down from Abraham, Esau is willing to throw all of that away for a bowl of stew. Filling his stomach in that moment is more important to him than the word of the Creator God, than all of the future blessings and promises. So Esau, we read in verse 34, despised his birthright. He didn't treat it with the value it had. It was pearls before swine. It'd be like using the deeds to your house as toilet paper. And as Hebrews 12 verse 16 says, he was godless. So don't think that Esau is just kind of a bit of a buffoon, that he's just a bit of a lad and he's not thinking things through properly. He's godless. He's more interested in the pleasures of a single meal than in knowing the blessing of the eternal God. He is rejecting what God offers. Now, is there a risk that any of us here this morning might do or might be doing just that? We hear wonderful promises from God, we sing about it, we talk about it, and they are ours for the taking if only we believe him. Like we said before, if we confess with our mouth and believe in our heart. That's it. Keep it simple. It's simple, it's straightforward, isn't it? They are ours for the taking, and yet, in the moment, with all this held out in front of us, kind of seeming future and maybe a bit intangible, we can be more concerned in the moment with satisfying the desires of our bodies. More concerned with gratification, with a full stomach, or a nice car, or sexual stimulation, or a comfortable home. Scratching the various itches of our bodies, swapping short-term pleasure for infinite blessing. Now, you don't need to be much of a mathematician, do you, to know that that is not a good deal. Esau might well look like the kind of person that your average ancient Near Easterner would think ought to inherit the promise. Their kind of ideal king. But he's not God's ideal king. And so God doesn't choose Esau to be the heir of promise, even though he's the firstborn. Let's look then at Jacob. Before we do, I'm going to state another very important principle in reading the Bible properly, because we need to do it a lot when we're reading Genesis. We grow up with stories, don't we? Filled with good guys and bad guys. Like your Spider-Man, that's what I read growing up, and X-Men and all that kind of stuff. You know, goodies and baddies. And we assume that the Bible works that way, because it's like that in all our fairy tales and our folk tales and our cinema. We assume that where a character isn't obviously the bad guy, therefore, by process of elimination, whoever's left is the good guy, right? But that's not how the Bible works. Because the Bible's a very sophisticated book. Sort of goodies and baddies works, doesn't it, for fairy tales. But this isn't a fairy tale. This is real. And so it is realistic in its depiction of human nature. It doesn't have cardboard cutout heroes. It doesn't really have goodies and baddies. Do you remember what Jesus said when the wealthy young ruler called him good? Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. Now, barring God, everyone in the Bible, even the best heroes, are going to have profound flaws. So here, we met Esau, didn't we? And if we're biblically literate at all, we realise he's not the good guy. Like, that's really obvious. Esau's not a good guy. He's godless. He's despised his birthright. He's like Nimrod, the founder of Babylon, the original evil empire. He's Emperor Palpatine. He set it up. And that's who he looks like. Or he's like Ishmael, who lives in hostility towards his brothers. Esau is an animalistic, godless man who despised his birthright and despised God. He has no respect for the way God works, and he chooses to disinherit himself from all the good that God could have offered him. And I want to stress this, because we sometimes feel like Esau gets a raw deal of it because Jacob just cheats him out of it twice. We'll see that in a few chapters' time. Esau could have been blessed through Isaac if only he'd wanted to. He rejected it all. And Esau's going to be a problem for Israel going forward. There are going to be wars fought between the people descended from Esau, the nation of Edom, and the nation of Israel descended from Jacob. And it just so happens that we were looking at this on Wednesday night in the book of Obadiah. You can read all about it. Stemming from this problem between Esau and Jacob. So Esau's obviously the bad guy. But that doesn't make Jacob the good guy. Jacob's a compelling character. He's probably my favourite human character in the Old Testament. And that's even more so than Ehud, because he's left-handed, and I like that in someone. Just because the author of Genesis often shows rather than tells, that is, just because he doesn't add comments criticising Jacob's behaviour, saying he shouldn't have done that, or that was a bit naughty of Jacob, that doesn't mean that we're meant to approve of it. When someone in the Bible does something obviously bad, when it's the kind of the hero of the story, we're not meant to think, well, that's good. We're meant to think, what's he doing? That's not right. You're better than this. Jacob's name, you see, is instructive. Names in the Bible, I've been doing this on our evening series, they're not arbitrary labels. They tell us about the character of the person. In Jacob's name, it sounds like the Hebrew for heel. So you've got hairy and heel. Not the nicest names for your kids, maybe. And he's called that because when he came out, as we read, he came out grasping his brother's heel, like he was kind of trying to wrestle to get out first. Heel grabber is a Hebrew idiom, a turn of phrase that means someone's a wrangler. They're a wheeler and a dealer. They're a trickster, a backstabber. They're a bit crooked. I mean, left-handed means something similar, actually, but heel grabber and hairy. So though Esau looks bad in this passage, so does Jacob. And what he says to Esau, Esau comes in and he's going to drop dead, and he's like, oh, give me some of that stew, I'm about to die. And what Jacob replies makes it look like he's been planning this for a while. Is that a godly way to treat your hungry brother, regardless of their character? To demand that they sell you their share of the inheritance? To rip them off? Because even apart from the promises of God, the substantial financial assets that Isaac had that would have been Esau's in large part, and he swaps it for a bowl of stew, then that's a bit crooked of Jacob to even make that deal. He's not offering him a fair price. He's withholding hospitality, which especially in an ancient Near Eastern culture is shameful. That's not how you treat a hungry person. If you've got food and there's a hungry person, you feed them. Is this what it looks like to show love? Now, unlike Esau, Jacob has the vision to see the value of the inheritance. He doesn't despise it. Now, he must have learned enough of God to know that the promise of blessing from God's hand is worth having. That's one little thing in Jacob's favour. But rather than seeking it legitimately, rather than praying, like Isaac did in verse 21, rather than inquiring of the Lord, like Rebekah did in verse 22, rather than going to his parents and asking for advice, and you think, well, that surely would have given Rebekah the chance to speak about the prophecy that she had from the Lord in verse 23. Rather than doing any of those things, he tries to grab it for himself. Now, unlike Esau, he's not rejecting God outright. But Jacob doesn't want God on God's terms. Jacob wants a relationship with God on Jacob's terms. He wants to be in control. He wants to win it for himself. Now, is that a risk that any of us take making this morning? Wanting what God has because it's so obviously good, but not liking the way that he's made it available. Do we want to win for ourselves what can only come freely from God's hand? Kind of looking around here. Have you ever ordered something and it's arrived and you get the box out, or imagine it's your birthday, you've got a new Lego box and you open it up and get the little bags out and the instructions, and you feel like there's a part missing. And you're like looking in the box, is it stuck on one of the flaps on the inside, or is it been put in one of the other bags by mistake? Because that's kind of the feeling we get here, reading Genesis chapter 25, meeting Esau and Jacob. Because we're expecting to find someone through whom this great line of promise is going to descend. And Esau, it's obviously not him, is it? He's obviously not fit to inherit God's blessing. He doesn't look like God's ideal of a king, but then neither does Jacob. We're digging around in the bottom of the box. Is this all you've got? Because as the story focuses on Jacob, and these two brothers are the only sons, by the way, of Isaac and Rebekah, and God has already said the older will serve the younger. He's saying it's going to be Jacob. And it's obvious that the blessing is going to descend through Jacob, but we look at him and we think, really? That guy, the heel grabber, the backstabber, the brother cheater, through a crooked sinner like Jacob. Jacob the swindler is the one God chooses. Isn't that reassuring? God doesn't just work through the upright, good, altogether together people. 1 Corinthians 1 says, God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God works in weird, apparently backwards ways. And he chooses weird and backwards people. Amen. Isn't that good news for us? Receiving the blessing of God doesn't rely on being good people or strong people or clever people. It relies on the sovereign will of a gracious and compassionate God who doesn't treat us as our sins deserve or repay us according to our iniquities, who works through the Jacobs of the world to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. You might not think this morning that you deserve God's blessing. And frankly, you don't. Because none of us do. I don't, you don't, nobody does. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's what the Bible tells us. There is no one who does good. No, not one. None of us deserve to be blessed by God. But can't you see from Jacob's story that it's not about deserving anything, is it? It's about God's goodness. About his disposition to bless us in spite of us. And seeing that his way of doing things is totally different to ours. The older will serve the younger. It goes in the face of fallen human culture, of the way we think things ought to be. But his way and not our way is the way that leads to life and permanent blessing. Coming to God through Christ means admitting that you can't earn God's blessing for yourself. It means admitting you are not good enough, you are not strong enough, and you are not clever enough. You might be able to outwit your stupid older brother, but you can't outwit God. Is this a lesson that we can learn quicker than Jacob did? Because as we're going to see, it will be painful for him. And I don't just mean that metaphorically. It will be physically painful for him learning what he should have known in the first place. God has a great inheritance prepared. Will we try and wheel and deal it out of him? Or will we just go to him through Jesus and ask him for what he loves to give? Let's sing our final hymn, 700.